Luna's eyes burned with a cold fire as she watched the sun set over Los Angeles, its dying light a cruel mirror of the vengeance that animated her soul. In her mind's eye, she saw Steffi Forrester as she once had been, aloof, protected by wealth and privilege, untouched by the grief that had defined Luna's own life. Memories of her mother's death. The whispered rumors that Steffi had covered up the accident, and the endless courtroom battles had forged a single, immutable purpose in Luna's heart, to compel Steffi to confess. To make her victim taste the bitterness of public shame just as Luna had tasted it in private agony. And so Luna had devised a plan so audacious it teetered on madness. She would take what Steffi loved most, her son, Hayes. Under the cover of night, Luna slipped into the Forrester mansion armed with nothing but a vial of sedative and the unshakable conviction that her desperate act would force the truth into the open. Her hands trembled as she crossed the threshold of Steffi's son's nursery, where Hayes slept peacefully, unaware of the storm gathering around him. With a swift motion born of years of pent-up rage, she injected the sedative into his cheek and lifted him from his crib, cradling him as though he were the only thing in the world that mattered. In that moment, Luna felt a strange pang of sorrow. Hayes was not the enemy, but he was the only leverage she had. She breached the walls of the Forrester household and vanished into the night, leaving behind only a scribbled note: "Tell the truth, or you lose him forever." When dawn broke, chaos erupted. Steffi, dressed in a woman's worst nightmare, a mother whose child has been stolen, raced through the halls of Forrester Creations, her scream echoing through the atrium like a battle cry. Ridge, Caroline, and the rest of the Forrester clan scrambled to comfort her, but overwhelming fear had turned her voice to steel. "Find his snatcher. Bring him home." Steffi's heartbreak was naked and raw. Her anguish unleashed a storm of questioning and recrimination among her family. How had security failed? Who would dare to kidnap a child of the elite? Every phone line buzzed with updates. Every security camera was scoured for clues, but as hours passed and Hayes remained missing, desperation gave way to panic. In a panic-stricken haze, Steffi stood before a hastily assembled press conference, tears staining her cheeks as cameras captured her promise. "I will confess my sins if my child is returned safely. I will do whatever it takes." Behind the scenes, Luna held Hayes in a hidden safe house, watching videos of Steffi's public pleas and reading every article that speculated on the motive for the kidnapping. Her resolve hardened. Steffi would confess, not in some limp, controlled deposition, but under the weight of a mother's love and guilt. But Luna had not counted on the arrival of Sheila Carter, the woman whose own dark past had once terrorized both Spencer and Forrester families. Sheila, who had wreaked havoc in her desperate quest for power and affection, now sought redemption in an unexpected place. She had followed the evidence to Luna's hideout and discovered the boy in his makeshift crib. The moment she laid eyes on Hayes, his chest rising and falling under a threadbare blanket, something in her cracked. She saw the innocence that stood at the center of Luna's vendetta. And for the first time, her own heart rebelled against years of cruelty. With Deacon Sharp in tow, Sheila arrived under the pretense of bargaining for Luna's cause. Deacon, torn between the love he still held for Sheila and the moral imperative to protect an innocent child, stood at the threshold, sweat beading his brow. Luna's eyes narrowed as the pair entered, their unexpected appearance both a threat and a salvation. "You think you can steal my vengeance?" Luna spat at Sheila. "This boy is the key to the truth." Sheila's voice was gentle but firm as she spoke Hayes's name, crouching beside the crib and softly stroking his hair. Deacon's throat tightened as he heard the tremor in Sheila's voice, a tremor born not of fear but of remorse. "Luna," Sheila said, rising to face her, "this child did nothing to you. You've suffered. Yes, but dragging Hayes into this won't make your pain vanish." It will only spread it around, and none of us will emerge unscathed. For a moment, Luna's grip on her plan wavered. Her chest heaved as she fought to maintain control, but Deacon stepped forward, his eyes glistening. "Luna, I know what it's like to lose everything," he said, voice cracking. "I've walked in the darkness, too. But I also know that vengeance is a poison you drink hoping someone else will die. I won't let you poison this child." Luna's lips curled into a bitter smile. "You think I fear you or your sanctimony?" "I fear nothing but the lies Steffy has told about my mother's death. I fear that justice will never be served unless I expose her." Sheila exchanged a glance with Deacon and then, with surprising decisiveness, scooped Hayes into her arms. "Then let's serve justice the right way. Let me take him somewhere safe. And you go to Steffy yourself. Face her in the open, tell her your story, let her confess on her own terms. But leave Hayes out of it." Deacon nodded in fervent agreement. Sheila's right. If you love Hayes at all, let him stay safe. You'll never get what you want by hurting him. Luna's mind raced as Sheila cradled Hayes, her arms a refuge from the violence that Luna's heart had demanded. The vigilante dream she had clung to for so long began to dissolve under Sheila's unexpected compassion. She realized that in her rage, she had become the very monster she detested. Tears pricked at her eyes as she looked at the boy, Steffy's son, her mother's grandchild. An innocent soul trapped between legacies of power and betrayal. With a ragged sigh, Luna stepped back, her shoulders slumping. "Fine," she whispered. "Take him." Sheila backed toward the door, Deacon at her side, and together they slipped into the early morning light, bearing Hayes to safety. Luna watched them go, her vengeance incomplete, her soul heavier than it had ever been. Alone in the empty room, Luna sank to her knees, her chest heaving with sobs that were part relief and part heartbreak. The walls around her seemed to close in, the silence pressing against her ears. She had sought to force the truth from Steffy by any means, but in the end, she could not sacrifice the child she claimed to protect. In that moment of agonizing clarity, she understood that reconciliation required more than a confession. It required forgiveness, not for Steffy alone, but for herself. The next morning, Luna appeared unannounced outside Steffy's front door, her clothes stained with the grime of the world she had trespassed. Steffy, exhausted from days of fear and guilt, opened the door, panic flickering in her eyes. Luna's voice was raw as she spoke. "I'm sorry. I took your son to make you speak, but I see now that I was wrong. I want to hear your truth, but I want more. I want peace." Steffy, trembling, stepped aside and ushered Luna into the grand foyer, the two women facing each other across a gulf of grief and accusation. For hours they talked. Luna poured out the pain of her mother's death, the courtroom's endless failures, the bitterness that had warped her into someone she barely recognized. Steffy, voice shaking, told her side, the accident at the Forrester fundraiser, the panic, the cover-up orchestrated by people who thought they were protecting her son's future. She confessed to every lie, every hidden document, every whispered threat that had kept the truth buried. As Luna listened, she realized that Steffy's fear had been as consuming as her own rage. The two women, separated by wealth and prejudice, found common ground in their shared humanity. When at last Steffy wept and begged forgiveness, Luna extended her hand. It was a fragile truce, but it was real. Meanwhile, Sheila and Deacon watched from a distance as Luna and Steffy emerged together into the morning light, their figures small but united. Sheila's gaze lingered on Hayes, playing contentedly at Steffy's feet, and she felt a warmth in her chest, a reminder that even in darkness, sparks of redemption could ignite. Deacon slipped his arm around her, and she leaned into him, allowing herself to believe in second chances. The three of them, victim, perpetrator, and redeemer, stood together in the dawning day. a testament to the unpredictable power of forgiveness and the human heart's capacity to heal. In Los Angeles, where fortunes rose and fell on ambition and betrayal, a new story had begun. One not of vengeance, but of truth, atonement, and the fragile hope that even the deepest wounds could someday be mended. Sheila's frantic plea echoed through the austere interrogation room as the metal door clanged shut behind her, though she had risked everything to save Hayes from Luna's vengeful clutches. The law had interpreted her midnight rescue as nothing more than another one of her reckless vigilante stunts. Now cuffed to the steel table, she stared across at Finn, her face a mask of anxiety tempered by desperate hope. Across the corridor, Steffi's anguished sobs rattled the pink walls of the nursery where Hayes had been recovering, so far. Too terrified to speak, his wide eyes haunted by images he could not name. Finn stood between the two women he loved, his biological mother, imprisoned for a crime of heart and rage, and his wife, whose panic threatened to swallow her. Though the district attorney pressed for bail to be denied, citing Sheila's long record of violence, Finn saw something in his mother's bloodshot gaze that transcended her past, a mother's fierce, redemptive love. He turned to the detective, voice steady but urgent. "I need access to her. I need to talk to her unmonitored so I can help my son." Every moment he delayed, Hayes sank deeper into his own terror. And so, under the hush of the precinct's late-night shift, he pushed aside the officer's doubt and flicked through the files that held the story of Sheila Carter's twisted journey from the alleyway where she'd learned to survive, to the web of betrayals and murders that had once made her the most dangerous woman in Los Angeles. His hands trembled as he taped a small recorder to the table. One recorded conversation could yield the key to unlocking Hayes's nightmares. Over the next 48 hours, Finn balanced on a razor's edge. By day he sat at Steffi's bedside, tracing her fevered brow with gentle fingers, soothing her endless litany of worst-case scenarios. What if Hayes never speaks again? What if his spirit is broken? By night he prowled the corridors of the county jail, returning to the sterile interview room where Sheila awaited him, wild-eyed, handcuffed, but unbowed. He began each session by reminding her of the moment she had saved Hayes, urging her to recall every detail: the twisted metal of the SUV's door, the flicker of fear in the boy's eyes, the instinct that had propelled her forward. Then, carefully, clinically, he steered the conversation deeper into the archives of her own tormented childhood, the foster homes, the cold nights spent beneath railroad bridges, the voices that told her to kill or be killed. As Sheila described each betrayal, Finn quietly scribbled notes, phrases Hayes had repeated in tears, behaviors he had mimicked when alone, hoping to map a pattern of trauma that could guide their therapy. But each revelation cut Finn like glass. To weaponize his mother's suffering for his son's healing felt like a betrayal of both of them. He wrestled with guilt, wrestling with the question, by dredging up Sheila's darkest hours, was he honoring her redemption or imprisoning her in the very past he sought to transcend? Meanwhile, Steffi's desperation reached a fever pitch. Dr. Finn fortuitously had no license to hold Sheila. Bail was set, and by morning the prison gates would open. In her hospital room, Steffi's voice rose to a plea that shattered the hush: if Sheila walked free, if Finn continued to consort with a woman who had once plotted murder, she vowed she would never forgive him. Their marriage would crumble, their son would live with two broken parents, and no corner of her privileged world would remain unscarred. Finn, pallid with exhaustion, watched his wife's tears glisten beneath the ICU lamp and bit his lip. Every time he tried to explain that he needed Sheila's insights to rebuild Hayes's shattered sense of safety, Steffi recoiled as though his words were poison. Yet, at the hospital's end-of-shift meeting, the pediatric psychiatrist laid bare the stakes. Hayes's trauma was acute dissociative shock. Without confronting the narrative of his rescue and the figure who had saved him, his mind would retreat into permanent silence. Finn understood then that he had to choose. Protect Sheila from her past or offer her the chance to become more than a criminal in Hayes's eyes. To free her from handcuffs would be to risk public outcry, yet to deny her would be to doom his son to a life of quiet terror. As dawn's pale light crept across the jailhouse yard, Finn made his decision. He requested temporary guardianship powers from the juvenile court so that Sheila could be present in therapeutic sessions at the hospital under strict supervision. The order was extraordinary, and it forced him to testify about Sheila's criminal record and the compelling need for her involvement in Hayes's care. In a packed courtroom, Finn stood in a tailored suit, his voice resonant with conviction. "This woman, my mother, has been to hell and back. But it was also she who answered the only scream my son has ever truly had. To help Hayes heal, we must allow her into his world, not as a demon, but as a witness and guide. Justice demands accountability, but compassion demands opportunity for redemption." The judge, swayed by Finn's plea and the psychiatrist's affidavit, granted the limited order. In that moment, Sheila, wearing a simple blouse and cuffs removed, stepped forward, tears of relief mingling with disbelief. Finn caught her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. Here was the risk he had chosen. Here was the hope he clung to. But as the courtroom murmured and Steffy watched with tear-streaked resolve, he knew the fallout was only beginning. Back at the hospital, under Finn's careful direction, the first joint therapy session commenced. The room was dimly lit, a single spotlight on Hayes's small hospital bed, where the boy lay clutching a worn teddy bear. Sheila perched on a chair at his side, eyes soft but vigilant. Finn stood behind her, a silent guard. At first, Hayes whimpered at the sight of her, his confusion mirrored in Sheila's own gaze as she whispered, "It's me, sweetheart. I'm your friend." Gently, she recounted the night she found him, using simple language free of guilt or accusation. Finn watched as Hayes's body trembled, then relaxed. He had feared that exposing him to the source of his terror would re-traumatize him. But instead the truth began to anchor his fractured mind. With each word Sheila spoke, honest, remorseful, loving, Hayes's fists uncurled, and the lines of fear on his small face softened. Steffy, standing just outside the observation window, gasped as she saw her son's first tentative smile. It was a small victory, but enough to prove that Finn's gamble had merit. Sheila looked up, meeting Finn's eyes across the glass wall. No words passed between them, but in that look was the understanding that her redemption, once thought impossible, had begun. Yet every family secret unsealed, every crime confessed, would ripple outward. Tabloids would howl, relatives would judge, and in the court of public opinion, Sheila's image would be reshaped forever. Finn had chosen to stand between past sins and future healing, to cast Sheila not as a villain, but as a flawed heroine, and in doing so he had tethered his family's fate to a fragile hope that love, even born of darkness, could be the catalyst for true transformation.